ado, I would like to welcome the six panelists along with the panel leader, Hajjah Nadia Bazzi. Hajjah Nadia Bazzi is an esteemed marital counselor in this community. We are very blessed to have her. So I would like to welcome with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm going to ask the couples to join me in the circle, please. And if you are comfortable moving forward into the second line, or rather the first, I would ask you to do so. So Haji, I need you to sit here, and then Duja will sit there. If you need to.
Keep it, all yours. You need some more?
So it looks like, Hassan, it looks like you're missing your wife. Does this happen often? So as we're waiting for Haji Khadija, what I want to do is explain a little bit about the setup for today because it's a little non-traditional. So this is a modified fishbowl, and the idea is that our panelists who are all married and in 3 couple units are going to lead us off in a conversation about what it means to find your ideal spouse. How does that happen? And I'm going to lead that. I have a chair to the right of me on the side of the brothers and an empty chair for the sisters. The idea is that you should come and join the conversation. How can you join the conversation? You are welcome at any time to come and sit in the empty chair and provide a comment, ask a follow-up question. And then once you provide that comment or question, you are invited to sit back in your seat. Does that make sense? Yes? Yes. What you're not invited to do is to dominate the conversation or continue if you have a follow-up. Really just go back to your seat and allow someone else to come in. So you can come back and forth as many times as you want, and hopefully what you would do is observe the conversation and then join the conversation and come in and out. So that's the game plan, and it's something new, something different. I hope you enjoy it, and I really hope that you participate. So feel free to add and contribute, and hopefully we can have a meaningful conversation. So to our esteemed couples, Assalamu alaikum and welcome. It would be great if you could introduce yourselves as a couple by providing your name, and we'll do for the sisters, if you could tell us, and this is an easy question, how many children you have, and for the brothers, how many years you've been married. And for the sisters, if your husband didn't get it right, please help him along.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. My name is Maya Murtada Kausan. My husband is Ali Kausan, sitting to the left of me. The question for the sisters was children. Okay. Yes, so I have 2 children. I have a 4.5-year-old girl, Hannah, and a 3.5-year-old boy, Zakaria.
Okay, so before I answer, is this Get Big Deb, or is this We Had the Wedding? Because that's a I don't know.
With your wife, ask her how she counts.
How do you count Maya?
Good answer.
It's both?
I would go with
And is it Hijrah, or is it?
You can give both.
So
Get
we
Big
were
Deb and wedding.
we were engaged in 2005, and we were married in 2007.
He's not good with math.
So there's a 2-year gap, which is
2.5 years.
2.5 years, which is something maybe we'll talk about later. Our next couple.
Okay. Hassan Alawiya, and we've been married for 11.5 years.
MashaAllah to the man.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Khadija Alawiya, and we have 4 children, and alhamdulillah, they're a blessing. We have a 9-year-old, 7, 5, and 4-year-old. 2 and 2 girls, 2 boys.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shadya Hamka, and I'm married to Musa Hamka, and we have 3 daughters. I have a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4.5-year-old.
We have been married for 11 years this coming April 29th. Would you like my Katabik Tib date as well? I could provide that for you.
Okay, I'm gonna take a mic back. So
I have the Tulbi date memorized as well.
So what I'm hearing is that there's many different dates. So there is, for some couples, a tulbi date, there is a kitab date, and then there's also a wedding date. And sometimes for other couples that, there's just one particular date. So even though you all may be from the same community, there's diversity in the way that you've chosen to get married and come together. I want to start off with the husbands. We're going to start with some light questions. Where do you first remember seeing your wife? And feel free to tell your wives. Don't tell me.
All right, that's an easy one. I remember the first time I saw Shadia. She had just returned from Hajj, and she was up at the YMA, and she was talking about the experience. And I remember the second I saw her, I said, I'm going to marry her. I remember I went to work, and I was telling my students, they're not Muslim. I was like, they're like, Mr. Hamka, you got an extra bounce in your step today. What's going on? I said, I met the girl I'm going to marry. And they're like, how long you guys been dating? I'm like, we haven't been dating. We don't date. And very complicated. No, she didn't. No. But we worked on that real quickly. Don't worry.
So I first saw my wife on a retreat.
Feel free to tell her.
Yep. That's good. So I first saw Khadija, you, on a retreat. And then I got to know you through, of course, a friend, namely your brother. And then it was all stars from there, right?
So I first met Maya in high school in Fortson, and then we took a school trip to Winthrop, Washington, which was a 55-hour train ride there and back. So we had plenty of time to talk, and I think about 6 months later, I think we started talking more seriously, and then the Katbik Dab came after.
So for our sisters, and thank you for sharing, if we were to ask your husbands, what makes you the ideal spouse for them? What would they say? So it's not what you think makes you the ideal spouse. What would they say?
Can we respond?
Yeah, feel free. We'll give you guys.
That's a tough question.
Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first? Maya, you want to do the honors? Okay, I can. So what makes me the ideal spouse? For Hassan.
What would he say makes you the ideal spouse for him?
It's a tough one. Maybe it's the acts of service that I've given in the relationship. The fact that I gave up my career and I decided to be a stay-at-home mom, even though we had the option, but I think that's a sacrifice I was willing to make that I think he would appreciate about our marriage.
Yep. Undoubtedly. I think we've had this conversation before, so it's definitely acts of service. It's coming home, knowing everything's prepared, everything's ready, kids are taken care of, she's taken care of, she takes care of herself, she's very independent. Alhamdulillah, I do my thing, she does her thing, and we get along.
So I think Ali's ideal spouse, for me, being an ideal spouse for him, number one is modesty. I feel like he appreciates modesty. Love notes in the lunch. That's something that he really likes that I stopped doing a long time ago.
Maybe you'll start again.
Maybe I will. And I think self-care. I think he really appreciates when I take care of myself. He's been very supportive in me continuing my education and my career. And I feel like he loves to see me doing well and caring for myself and taking the time I need for myself. So I think that's something he appreciates.
So yeah, I think that kind of hit it on the note. For me personally, it's when Maya's having a tough day and we're able to work together to help her get through that, or if if she's making some great strides at work, I think those are the types of things that I don't. It's kind of hard to put in words, I guess, but I think you nailed it. Yeah.
I think Musa's ideal spouse is one with good morals and whose focus is to raise a good family, to, raise our children in the right direction, and I don't know, I think those are the two big ones.
Well, certainly Shadia is ideal for many reasons. I think number one, she's very giving of herself. She's not selfish at all. She's always willing to put herself first before everyone. So when my mom had to come move in with us, she welcomed her with open arms, and that's just been a theme. She's very giving to her family, to her mom, her dad, to everyone. But I guess I'll jump in a little philosophical here. Yeah. I remember thinking, why would I marry Shadia before I married her, right? Like how do I know she's the one? And I remember I kept thinking there was one question. And so I think this is actually a very important question that I think every person should ask themselves before they get married. Hopefully, inshallah, all of us aspire to have children. And so the question is, let's say you do have children and unfortunately you pass away early. Would your spouse raise the kids the right way? Are you content? Do you know that the kids would be fine without you? And so, Shadia, yeah, she's a rock star like that. So, there you go. That's my answer.
It's wonderful. So we're noticing diversity in the answers, but also a common theme of self-sacrifice. That what makes someone an ideal spouse is someone who's willing to give up some of their self for the greater good of the family while still taking care of themselves. And so I've noticed we have some new people joining us. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum. I want to point out to you that you're more than welcome to fill the front seats. I have two open seats. Participants are more than welcome to sit in the empty seats, sisters here, brothers here, to ask a question or provide a comment and join the inner conversation. And then once you do so, go back to your seat. And so we won't have formal Q&A. This will serve that purpose. So I guess my next follow-up question is, before you get married, you have all of these ideas of what your perfect spouse is. And then you get married, you've been married for, a couple years, a decade, more. And all of those things of the ideal spouse, I'm assuming radically change. So I'm wondering, can we talk a little bit about what, in your opinions, people think they want in an ideal spouse versus what actually matters?
Who are you asking, to the girls or the guys?
This is a conversation. So, what did you think you want 11 years ago, 12 years ago?
Oh, wow. Can I jump in from the guy's point of view? So, certainly our culture, Arab culture, right, it plays a role in our upbringing, sometimes fortunately, sometimes unfortunately. And so I would say, when I wanted a good mom, I wanted a good wife, I wanted the food on the table when I got home, I wanted the house clean. That left my head about 2 years in. What I really wanted is my wife to become educated, to be able to stand on her own 2 feet, to be able to be independent, and also to be a good role model to my daughters.
So you were even willing to have those priorities shift, which allows you to have a healthy marriage.
Absolutely.
You made this comment last time you spoke. I didn't know I wanted a nerd, but I'm so glad I got a nerd.
So like you're bringing up the notion that sometimes people are subconsciously attracted to the bad boy and all the drama that comes with it. Or brothers are attracted to, the Barbie doll. There's not a lot going on. And it's not eventful for a decade long of a relationship. Doesn't
Yeah,
work.
I agree 100%. I mean, the things I value in Ali is he's a good father, he's a hard worker, he appreciates knowledge. So those are things I appreciate much more than the guy who wants the sports car, who is always thinking about the next vacation, you know, things like that.
I wouldn't classify it as nerdy. I would say one of the things I've grown to appreciate, and I give advice to others who are getting married, is look at the intellectual level. Doesn't necessarily always equate to educational level, but what's the intellectual level of that other person, and are they on that same level? I think that's important.
I'm noticing that we have some participants joining, so Nadia, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I had a question. Have you guys ever felt like, you know, when you get to know the person in the beginning steps, that you ever had to push back from being yourself 100%? Or was it easy for you to trust that person right away to be yourself? Or did you feel like you had to take away a few good qualities from yourself and push it back a bit?
So to clarify, are you asking, are you guarded, or do you have to change yourself up in order to, do you have to be guarded?
So I can kind of start on that one. I wouldn't necessarily call it guarded, but I definitely watched what I would say. There was only certain things that I would put out, not because I was trying to hold back, but because I was scared it would come out wrong and I couldn't communicate properly. So it takes time for you to establish a good dialogue with each other, and there's always a language barrier. So it's common words that you use between each other. You think they mean the same thing, but they mean totally different once you're in a relationship. So I wouldn't necessarily say I guarded what I was doing, but I definitely watched what I said earlier on. I was very cautious.
I'm noticing we have another participant.
I was guarded. Seriously, I didn't want to get hurt. Well, let's be real. You're a human being, and no one wants to get hurt, right? And you're opening up, you're getting to know this person, you're explaining everything about your life and your past, and who has a perfect past, and who comes from a perfect family. You know, it's just, life is complicated. And you don't want to get hurt, and you're going to be vulnerable, so, you know, sometimes you got to watch it.
So to the point that no one's perfect.
Till the trust is there.
Before we invite Brother Ahmed with his question, there was the FYI, the Family Youth Institute. In 2014, Dr. Ahmed published a report about risk factors of Muslim youth. And so one of the things we find is that Muslims in college are not immune to risk behavior. So you're all parents. You're raising your children. The idea that just because my kid is Muslim doesn't mean that they're going to be perfect. Which is a scary thought, but sometimes it's something that blinds people. So college is often a time where people meet and they get married. What we know is that 48% of women and 57% of men who are Muslim and in college in America have premarital sex. Equally, 48% of women and 45% of men drink alcohol. So when you think about your ideal spouse, how does this come into play? What are things to do to reconcile this? How do you know if you're talking to the wrong person? And this is a changing time. So let's acknowledge that, you know, these rates are probably higher than when you two first got to know each other. Maybe not. Don't want to age anyone. But what are some thoughts around that?
Okay, well, you know, it's a tough question. Certainly, that's something I think everyone thinks of. You know, being conservative and doing things old school doesn't always mean that you're closed-minded. It means you have some respect and that you value some traditions that are very honorable. So my mom is not Arabic. You know, my dad's Lebanese, my mom is Polish and Irish. My wife, her mom is from Lebanon, her dad's from Malta. So we both come from mixed families. One of the things I love the most is when I wanted to get to know my wife, right? Like I said hi to her, you know, you plant the seed, you have a couple of conversations. And then I remember, like, I asked her, I'd like to get to know you if the opportunity exists. And she's like, you know, let me go ask my father. So before I even spoke to her on the phone for the first time, we had the blessings of her father. So I think we just started off on the right foot.
So integrating parents is important.
I was going to say, going back to ideal spouse, it's important to find that ideal spouse that has some faith and traditions. And so the first thought that came to mind for me when you said those statistics was why the importance of marriage at a young age. Because the older you get, the harder it gets, the more temptations, the more independence, you're out there in the world. And so for me, I valued, me and Ali, like when me and you got married at 18 and 19, we did katb kitab. You know, so I really appreciate that we grew together. We learned to love each other. And I admit to this, I did not love Ali when we first got married. When we did first kitab, we learned to love each other. But I appreciate the values he had, the ambitions he had. He was somebody who was determined to finish his education. And so that was ideal for me. And it scared me. I was guarded, like Musa said. I was afraid because I'm trusting my life with another person. And it's scary to not know if he does have a past. And so I appreciated his faith-based lifestyle. And so that was an ideal thing for me. Even though he was like 19 years old with nothing, pretty much. I mean, working on his bachelor's. But I appreciated his faith and his ambition for education.
And I think it's really important in the beginning when you're starting off with your relationship to be very open and honest and ask those tough questions. Don't hold back. Don't think it's too early. I think that's one of the things we did is we really just, from the first day we spoke, like the questions were just asked, they were addressed, and
Set the boundary.
yes, yeah. So don't wait.
Let's jump in here. My wife, she's pretty mature at a very young age. I think we started talking. How old were you? 18. So like when she says she asks the questions like right away. So I remember the first night we spoke. Okay, I remember I gave her my number. I'm like, all right, she'll wait 3 weeks. She'll play that whole game before she calls me. She called me that night, 10 o'clock. We hung up for morning prayer. It was around 6 o'clock in the morning. Really long conversation. I remember she asked me all these really tough questions. I mean, like, I mean, listen, we talked about everything. Like, would you ever put your parents in a nursing home? What's the role of a husband in a marriage? What's the role of a wife in a marriage? How many kids? I mean, like, it was like, great. I loved it. There was a point where it got a little quiet. She asked me a question. She's like, why are you quiet? I'm like, because I'm thinking. She's like, good. I hope I didn't scare you. I'm like, no, you didn't scare me. And then I remember she said this. She said, it was so wise. I mean, who says this at 18? She said, if you don't like the answers now, you won't like them 6 months from now. But the difference is your heart. In 6 months, you'll be thinking with your heart. Today, we can think with our heads. Yep. Woo! That's a pretty good answer, isn't it? So, I mean, day one, when she's being modest, I asked them tough questions. She grilled me. How are you doing, Ahmed? You want to get grilled too?
Assalamu alaikum. I think the only question that I have for you panelists, mashallah, you guys are all very young, still very young. But when you guys were talking, I heard 18, 19, I heard 18. I assume that you were probably 19 as well.
23.
But nowadays, people don't even think about getting married until after their bachelor's degree, until maybe after their PhD, until after they nail that job, which won't be 5, 6 years from that point that they're talking. So what would be the ideal time for somebody to start thinking? Because as Hajjah Maya spoke, the longer you wait, the harder it gets, and the more temptations will arise. So.
Well, as the only person who in this group that got married at 30, I would say that there has to be a lot of things that happen at one time for it to be just right. So at 18 and 19, you might need more of your parents' support. At 30, you have to be flexible in understanding where you're at. What are some of your thoughts?
For me, we did need the support from our family, but we had the 2.5 years that we waited. So we were both, we were obviously we were married Islamically. We did katb kitab, so that way there would never be haram. We worked on our bachelor's. Ali had 1 semester left before we moved in together. We had a wedding, did the Lebanese tradition, had a big white dress wedding, and we moved in together, and alhamdulillah, a semester later, Ali graduated, and we were able to support each other on our own. So going back to ideally what to do, Ahmad's question, you have to set your goals in life. You have to have something to bring to the table. You can't just go to a girl's house and say, I'm 18, I want to marry you, and not have something to show them that you're working hard towards something. Yes, a vision, a plan, and so write your goals down. Think about what you want in your future and what you want in an ideal spouse. Write them down, and then you can probably work on finding that spouse at that age.
So what I hear you saying is if you're walking in the clouds and you think you're in love, don't go knocking on Mama and Baba's door and say, I want to marry your daughter.
Exactly. You need to have a plan, and Ali did. And I appreciated that so much. He told me, I want to be an engineer. He was working on it. And he's like, okay, we'll get married as soon as I graduate. We actually moved it up a semester because I wanted a summer wedding. I didn't want to get married in December. So, we moved it up. We worked it out. We did have support. Alhamdulillah. It's tough when you don't have the support, but we really appreciated the support of the family. But Ali was very responsible, too. He worked hard, and he saved. So it comes with hardship. I mean, it's not easy to get married young. But if you have a vision, you have a plan, you sacrifice. That's the biggest thing I tell young people is sacrifice, compromise, and respect in a relationship. And then inshallah, you can have a successful relationship.
Anyone else?
So to Ahmad's point, just kind of my experience with the whole thing, I had graduated before I had even thought of getting married. I knew that was something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to start a relationship before I graduated for a couple of different reasons. And one of the main reasons was that I was in engineering school, so there weren't that many girls anyways. And I really didn't know that many. In all honesty, I didn't know that many women. I didn't know any of the classmates or anything like that. And so just to have a relationship was a little foreign to me. So after I graduated, I got a job and so forth, and that's when I started understanding the female variety. And it took a while.
So, Hajj Musa, you had a job working as a math
Yeah. Mine's a little different. I mean, I've always wanted to get married young. I think for me that goes back to several reasons, right? I've always wanted a family. I don't know why. I always wanted a lot of kids. That was just my personality. I think part of it is, your background, your upbringing. Like my parents had gotten a divorce. So I always wanted to get married and do things my way, the right way. You're a kid, right? But also I think my situation, I'm very outgoing, and I had a large circle. Yeah, the cars, I know. So the sports car, Maya, she was talking about me. I had a large circle of friends, right? I'll tell you, one of the things, to the brothers, the mental maturity, right? So I remember I was young. I would, I had my fun, right? I used to go on vacations and outings and just hang out with the guys. But I remember there becomes a point, like no one wants to be lonely, right? Nobody wants to be lonely. There's a song, Nobody Wants to Be Lonely. Remember the song? But anyways. So you start to mature, and then you realize that your friends really don't fill your bucket the way you want it filled anymore, right? And then you start to look, and I think there has to be that maturity where you're ready, I think, for the next step. Now, I remember taking like 24 credits at a time. One time I took 27.
I took 28.
I know. Why? Because I wanted to finish early so I could get married.
So you're actually speaking to one of the questions that I have written down here. And the question that I have written down is, at some point in time, people feel lonely when they're single, and they start to ask themselves that question of, when will I be with that person I'm supposed to marry? And sometimes that's a question that either motivates them to get things in order in their life, or it's something that really depresses them. But I would say it's a universal question. People have felt lonely, at least at one point in their time. And one of the saddest things that happens is when you're married and feel lonely, right? Like, that's not the point. That's rough. So I'm wondering if you're willing to share, like, if you ever had that moment, or, you know, people who've had that moment, what advice would you give to our gracious audience if they are feeling like, when will it be my turn?
This loneliness, I can speak to that. Not that I'm lonely with my husband, but I think it's on a different level. As a stay-at-home mom, let me just say this: when we first went on a YMA retreat, and I was, I think, 18 at the time, 17, and the question was posed, will you ever get married? I said, I'll never get married. I'm not looking to get married. It's not something that I want to do anytime soon. I want to, you know, get my degree and graduate. And then a year later, I got married, but not knowing it wasn't something that I wanted to do. But subhanAllah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts that in your path, you are in a pivotal moment, you make that decision, and you, by the grace of God, hope for the best. But when I got married and we had our first 2 children, and then we had our third, and then we had our fourth, I remember thinking to myself, because my kids are so close in age, I felt like I was alone in the house with my kids and there wasn't an adult in sight. And that's the loneliness that really like bothered me. But we live in a society where you always want instant gratification, right? You want a text message, you want an answer from your loved one, you send them a text, they'll reply. You need to call someone, you pick up the phone, you call. But with our children, when you're raising your kids, you don't see this instant gratification. They're growing up year by year, but the hard work that you put into them isn't something that you're gonna see instantly. It's something that you will enjoy, inshallah, when they get older. Maybe when they're 9, when they decide to put on their hijab, or maybe when they decide that, you know, this is the time for me to pray. I'm gonna go pray by myself. My mom didn't tell me, but I will do it on my own. That's a moment of joy, of, you know, I conquered. For all the times that I spent with them in these 4 walls by myself, although I was sacrificing, he was also sacrificing. I mean, it's a two-way street. He was at work, putting in the hard work, while I was at home taking care of the kids. And in that sense, I felt loneliness, but now I understand why it was necessary, because for me, that was a greater, inshallah, it's a bigger outcome.
So part of being an ideal spouse is knowing that you're planting seeds and eventually it's going to grow, and how to be patient with that. And I would imagine, if we think about our audience members who may be single and lonely, planting seeds in yourself, so that when you do get married and you are ready, like, you have the maturity, you have the qualities that you need to make it work, kind of in the same way as raising your kids. How do you raise yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a daunting task. Like, how do you bear the burden of both people in the relationship? You have this soul that's walking, who pretty much has your heart. They're walking now, they're on their own, and you have to trust that what you teach is something that they're going to take away and be good Muslims. You know, it's very,
Yeah.
but alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps, and you just have to make it work.
Does anyone else have a comment about that subject? If not, I have another question. But specifically, you know, when you think of yourselves as being single back in the day.
Single, so not married.
Single.
And I think we've all been married and lonely.
Well, right, and so, but that's something to talk
Like when
about.
your wife has a kid, and the kid gets all that attention.
Yeah.
Which is common.
Come on now.
So,
You're a little lonely.
It's normal. Yeah.
That's
so
normal.
We're saying
But you're talking about single.
So what we're saying is that is an experience that has nothing to do with relationship status. that is something that comes and goes, and it would be inappropriate for someone to think, I'm lonely because I'm not married. No, it's just like where life is at right now. Because sometimes people make really bad decisions out of loneliness. Like, well, I'll marry whoever is available, and you got a disaster.
I guess I can touch on it. So,
lonely. You got married at 15.
thanks, Musa.
You're welcome. Brevity.
Yeah. So I guess I can give you some background on, at least from my perspective. So I grew up in Grand Rapids. I moved here when I was 10, and I think it was a hard adjustment because the culture, I think, was very difficult to adapt to and assimilate to. So I went to school at Fortson, I think around 15, 16. Those were probably one of my toughest years. And then near 17, I knew I needed a change. Right? At least I knew something had to happen, and I got, really depressed. And I think that's actually a good thing. When you get depressed, sometimes you think, well, that I don't want that. But in fact, when you get depressed, that just means there's a void. You need to fill it. You need to, do some soul searching. So for me, marriage, to be honest, was step 2. It was, I need to find my faith. And when I found my faith early, alhamdulillah, it was really a blessing that I had that awakening so early on. It put things in perspective for me. I was able to prioritize my life better. And as Maya mentioned, we had a very good long-term strategy at an early age because we were able to build that foundation of faith. And I had the blessing of going to Hajj really early before I got married. And that also, put things in perspective for me too.
What's interesting is this whole group has gone to Hajj early, which is something to think about. Mariam, you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I've had a lot of friends who came and approached me before, and someone came and approached, and multiple people have approached this person, and she always tells me, what's your advice on that I'm not finding that right person, yet I've had so many experiences that I feel lonely, I'll never find that person.
Okay, so that's a great question, and I'm going to add another part of this question. So thank you for that prompt. So there was recently an article that was written by David Brooks in the New York Times. It was an op-ed. It was just published on the 23rd. And it's called 3 Views of Marriage. So what he says is, one popular view of marriage is what psychologists say. Like, you have to think analytically. There's divorce rates. There's, like, the science of love. He says the other lens is the romantic lens, that people say that you need to have this passionate love affair because eventually you're not going to feel passionate and in love. So when things get rough, you need to rely back on those war memories. And then the third thing he says, not the third thing. The next thing he says is that there's a book called The Good Marriage, and what it says is only 15% of romantic relationships last a lifetime. And so the third thing he then says is the third way to look at marriage is through a moral lens, meaning that if you, as in your marriage, serve a higher purpose or the service of God or some cause, that's the thing that binds you together. And he then quotes another book called The Meaning of Marriage and says he says marriage introduces you to yourself. So I guess my question, kind of to piggyback off of Mariam's question, is what lens of marriage do you think is the best, or which one do you use? And how were you introduced to yourself in your marriage? Those are pretty big questions.
Morals, I think, for me. Akhlaq wal iman. What do you look for in marriage? You look for faith and morals. And I think one of the things we used to talk about early on is, if you marry a person, and this is a generalization, but, if a woman respects her father, she'll hopefully respect you. If a young man respects his mother, hopefully he's going to respect his wife. But then the other piece is, when me and Shadia get in an argument, there's always God, right? And so, you might debate who's right and wrong, but I guess God is always that trump card that comes in and just, puts the law down. And I think if you always have that lens and you have someone who really has a true religion in their heart, I think, you're always going to be on good footing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually gives us that guidance, right? He tells us in the Holy Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, compassion and mercy. So does that person, are they a compassionate person? But then I'll say, are they going to be merciful? And so, like, what does that mean to be merciful, you know?
So compassion and mercy maybe through that moral lens.
Through a moral lens, so, you know.
Musa kind of touched on what I was going to say, but moral is definitely for me. Like, and I mentioned this already, I didn't love Ali when we first got together. When I came to my father after Ali approached me to take it to the next level, because we were friends and we knew each other from high school, my dad asked me, "You're so young. Why now?" And I said to him, Ali has faith, and that to me is very important. He didn't have money. He didn't have, the ideal husband that's going to come and take you and give you a big home and a nice car and a big diamond ring. And, I waited 10 years for my diamond ring. Yeah, I just got it this year. Because my appreciation for Ali was more than just material. I knew that this is going to be the father of my children. Thank you. So I wanted somebody who was faith-based. Like, I told my dad that, if I can't choose a spouse based on faith, I have to wait till he's a certain age. Just because he's 25 doesn't make him any better than 18, 18 with faith, somebody who wants to get married, somebody who's seeking that, it's haram, I feel, on us to reject a person based on age when he wants to get married and is ready to get married. And Ali was ready at the time.
So that moral lens of marriage is one that seems to be really resonating with this group.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off that. It's the concept of having a partner. A spouse is also a partner. I know they're not necessarily synonymous, but in order to have somebody who's there to fall back on, who's there to remind you constantly, hey, this was the goal, this is the plan, don't forget. I think that's important too.
When we first, and again, I think Maya and I can relate to Maya. When I first met Hassan, I didn't know him. I knew his siblings and I knew his sister. His sister was very close to me. But I didn't know Hassan. And I didn't, you know how you go to the movies and you see these movies, they're like, oh, I'm head over heels, I love him, I can't live with him. That's the romance lens. That doesn't exist. There's no such thing. If that's what you're searching for, it's not there.
It does at 15%.
15%. It does. Well, maybe Musa, it happened for you.
I want to hear from my wife. She's been pretty quiet.
But I mean, my husband, subhanAllah, it wasn't there for me, but now I feel like our love has grown to an extent where it started, but it's grown so much that I've never could have imagined that we could have gotten to this point, and it's with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, really. But the first thing that happened when we first got married, I think it was the first year into our marriage, and I said, I love this man in a sense that, he fits me, he fits me. And he said, I love you too, but I love Allah more. And I'm like, wait, you love Allah more than me? And at that point, I was very naive to understand what he was trying to say to me. And then when we went to Hajj our second year, I figured, if you really love Allah more than me, then that means that I love you even more. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us together. And this, to me, it was very touching for me, for him to say that to me. And it's something like this that our parents don't talk about. You see these in the movies and they give you these false hopes. But this is something that you really need to aspire for, I think. So.
And what we know about love is that the love of companionship, what you're talking about, that's the love that creates long-lasting couples that last a lifetime, that don't end up in divorce. It's the love of companionship. So Musa and Shadi, do you have any thoughts before we get into the next question?
I want to hear what my wife has to say.
No, I don't have much to say. It's really feeding off of what Maya and Hajjah said. It's the same thing. It's the moral aspect. And I think the biggest thing in a relationship is people have to understand it's a struggle, day in and day out. And it's not only necessarily like a bad struggle, but you're gonna have those arguments. You're gonna have those family struggles. You're gonna have things that come up. God forbid you might lose a child. So many things happen. And if you're both on the same page and your ideas are the same and your morals are the same, then you're going to get through anything. And if you can get through that, you're golden, I think. So.
Wait, hold on. Can we get real here? Like, we're talking about, you know, I didn't love her. Let's be real. I was infatuated with her. When I didn't talk to her, I couldn't wait to get home. So there was excitement. We're being like downers here. Like, look, marriage is an exciting time. Courtship is really, it's euphoric. Let's just be real. I'd get home from work, right? The first thing I do is get on my phone. I want to talk to her. Every single day I used to see her. I used to go, I remember, she knows this, right? I'd go before school. She went to Wayne State. So I'd wake up at like 5 in the morning before I went to work. I'd go put her flowers and a little note on her car. Come on, there's some romance involved. Let's be real. Right? بدك تحبها للبنت. شو الشغلة?
And
you gotta like the girl.
I hope that you always do that.
But your definition of love, it changes.
It matures.
It matures. So at first, it's more of an infatuation, right? You like her, you're absorbed in her. It's something new. You want to look into her eyes, you know, all that good.
So
you melt like a stick of butter, and then it changes.
Physical feelings of being in love simulates wanting to throw up.
No.
Yes. Take any social psych class. So accelerated heart rate,
yes, that happened.
Palms,
that
butterflies
happened.
in the tummy.
That happened.
Like, you know, you get a little shaky and jittery, like you don't know what's going on. Those are the things that we feel. But the thing is, the body cannot handle feeling like that for 20 years. So the body kind of needs to regulate. But when it regulates, it deepens in love.
It does. You're
which
right.
is interesting. So like, let's turn it over. We have a question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Hajj Musa, you are very excited. I like this.
I
this
think
is
he's
very
in
nice.
love.
Yes, you are deep in love. Yes. So my question is to, well, it's going to be to both sex. The first fight, I would want to see, not how it happened, that's cool, but the first like real, like you guys were upset, how was it resolved, and who was the person to initiate the I'm sorry?
Interesting. And I will provide this piece of premarital education. The amount of times you argue is not a predictor of divorce. The way in which you're able to resolve the argument and have your repair attempts work is the thing that keeps you a long-lasting couple. So it's not about frequency, it's do you have a game plan to resolve your issues?
I already put my foot in my mouth 100 times.
So, I mean, what's a good strategy for resolving conflicts?
So first things is before I actually got married, but I was engaged, I got one piece of really good advice, and that was never leave a scar. So what that meant, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but now it's definitely much more understood, especially during the first fight, was that never say anything stupid to the point where that's something that that other person will remember forever. They'll always be reminded that that scar is there. And you said that one time, that one thing that really put you over the edge.
So don't come out with your fighting words. Oftentimes people say things they don't mean. And they also send text messages that they would never say to someone if they were in front of them. What's that? Yeah. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. So I got into, I think Maya has something to say too. I got into an argument with, it wasn't an argument, it was a spirited discussion with my husband. And I said, you know, notice, I just need for you to validate my feelings and I'll be over this. And then he starts saying something else. I'm like, if you know, you're so lucky I can even tell you what I need. Most wives don't even do that. And then they move on. So the next day, I was like, you know, I'm not over it. I told you exactly what I needed, and you didn't do it. He's like, well, I didn't know what you meant, but I Googled what it means to validate feelings, and it's so simple. So sometimes we ask for things, but, you know, Poor guy, he didn't know what I meant. Maya?
You know, for me, it's expressing yourself, never leaving it unresolved. So it's important. Like whenever me and Ali fight, which we do fight, and I always, like, after we've cooled down, like say we've left to work, or you know, I call him up and I say, Ali, you know, maybe I overreacted, or you know, I say my faults first, and then there's the but. But this is how I feel about what you did, or I explain why I was hurt or why I felt the way I do. So I give my opinion, but we've cooled down at that point, and usually there's apologies. I usually apologize first, I have to say.
Yeah.
What? Yes. I usually apologize first. Because
Okay, now that I have the microphone, let me tell you the truth. No, I think it's important, and I would say it's more half and half, but I think it's important that when there is a fight that there needs to be reconciliation. And I think if you just let it go, and then, you know, it'll resurface itself, but it'll get even worse. I mean, we've had issues where we didn't address it properly, and it did progressively get worse until we addressed it. So
Yeah, and you're speaking to another great point of premarital education, is that one thing we tell all couples is address it when it's small. Don't wait till it bubbles up. So 2 other resources for families and for couples. One is called Nonviolent Communication. NVC, the author of this theory, his name is Marshall Rosenberg, and you can go on his website and incorporate some of his tools. So it's basically how to say what you need without criticizing someone. So, you know, the garbage needs to go out. It's not you. I can't believe you. You're the worst person in the world. You just came straight in, didn't even walked past the garbage. I left it there as a test. Those things are not helpful. Oh, that word test, you know, like, it's not helpful. Say you have a need. I need for this to go out, because when it's in here, I feel cluttered. The house doesn't feel clean. I don't feel good. Can you just help me take care of this? And make the request. So nonviolent communication, and then there's also the 5 languages of apology.
My wife is really good at that.
Yeah.
It's called mlukhiyya. My wife doesn't make mlukhiyya often, but when she wants to say I'm sorry, I come home, there's mlukhiyya, then I know she's good.
That means she truly knows you. Alhamdulillah. So there's one thing we know, and like I shared about the repair attempts that came from John Gottman, this comes from him as well. He says compatibility doesn't mean you stay together. Meaning the way you mesh and your personalities, like people say, I need someone to just like understand me. He says that doesn't make you stay together. What makes you stay together is your healthy interaction with each other. So you could get along great, but if you're in conflict, you have the wrong interaction, you're not gonna probably stay together as a couple. So my question for this group, and we'll do a go around, is what is your couple interaction? How would you describe it? And you can describe it differently.
You don't want to think about it.
No, let her go first.
Okay, go Let's hear what you have.
I think one of the biggest things with us is communication, and it's laying it all out on the table. What I've realized, and I hope it's going to answer your question, but in the beginning of our relationship, for example, when we did argue, I kind of shied away. I didn't want to deal with it. It's that pride. And I realized that by doing that, it only gets worse, and then you're like in a really big mess, and it's like, how do I fix this? So now, through 11 years of marriage, I realized it's communication. Just say what needs to be said, discuss it right then and there. And even Islamically, it's not good to leave it. Yeah. You know, God forbid you go to bed and not wake up the next morning. You basically just left, you know.
So your interaction is open, and
Yeah.
you feel safe, and you're willing and able to address things immediately.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And I think we're there.
You know, and I think you become more like each other and more centered as a couple. So Shadia is naturally more reserved and shy. I'm just a little bit outgoing, and I'm very blunt. Just a little bit. So in the beginning, I was very quick to tell her how I felt. Why? Because, you know, I thought being a good guy. I'm telling her how I feel. No, she doesn't want to talk about how she feels. So I tell her how I feel, and then she's just quiet. I'm like, okay, this is great. Every book said, tell her how you feel. Now you tell her how you feel. She doesn't say a word. But I think over the years, you as a couple, you find your center. So I think she's more outgoing now. She's more willing to open up, and I'm more reserved. I'm a better listener. Yes. And the mlukhiyya is really good.
I think it's the opposite for me and Hassan. I'm a communications major. And he's the engineer. And I pride myself, when we first got married, I'm like, well, I know that you're an introvert and you just won't talk to me. So we're not going to sleep upset tonight. We're going to talk about it. And you hear Hassan. I'm like, no, seriously, Has, wake up. So, yeah, please. But no, I mean, you have to learn that that's just how he is, personality-wise. But he finally came around, and he understands that I want that time to communicate, to talk things through, even if it means to just sit and have a bedside conversation and to just be candid about the day and what had gone on and how I feel about, what we did with the kids or how we responded to one of the kids' questions. I just love having that time with him, just alone, and just to talk about anything, our aspirations, what we want. And I cherish that time. So.
Yep, just to piggyback off that, she likes to dive deep. She likes to understand what the problem is. She likes to understand exactly what's going on. I make light of the situation all the time. There's always humor with me, and it really annoys her, but that's just how I deal with things. But what I think I've been able to do is just give her that time. That's one thing that she loves. And so I don't make light of it, and then, she continues to be upset, and I just walk away. I just be with it, understand it. We get through it.
So you have humor and quality time as part of your interactions.
Do you want to go first?
At least you're overly accommodating.
So it's funny because Ali is kind of like Hassan. He brings a lot of dry humor to it, like sarcasm, and it annoys me. But you know what? It really actually helps, because you laugh about it, and because there's a lot of challenges in marriage, children, finances. There's just too many things that we worry about nowadays, and so I definitely love the quality time. I am more of the social person, so I love to talk about things. I love to put it all out on the table and to just hash it out and get it out of the way. And I get anxiety if I don't know what the plan is for that problem or for that situation. So my anxiety level starts to go up, and then his humor comes in, and then it's just going to be a really fun fight. But I do love the pillow talks, just discussing them. The thing that we've also learned, I feel like we've learned from each other, is that when I'm having a bad day and I say I don't want to talk about it, he will say, let's talk about it. He knows me now because I do want to talk about it, but I just kind of want to block it out a little bit. But he'll keep pushing me until I do express myself, and I appreciate that now. Whereas before, I think he just, okay, she doesn't want to talk about it. He'll just let it go and walk away. And I'm like, no, I do want to talk about it. Come back.
Yeah, pretty much.
So.
So it's kind of anticipating me.
Yes. So I appreciate that from him. Yeah. Yeah.
And this might sound a little cruel, I guess, but I agree about the compromise. I mean, over time you start to understand your spouse, and you start to understand how to communicate better. I think you touched on it earlier, but for instance, if there is a time that Maya doesn't want to talk, I think maybe this is more just trolling, but I will intentionally annoy her until she wants to talk about it. Yeah, and it's one of those where I don't want you to go to bed at night with this on your mind if we don't have time to talk about it in the future. So I want to do what I can to at least get it out, and then we can address it. And maybe it's not a 5-minute discussion, but at least give me the understanding of what your perspective is, so I know why you're upset. And then if I can address it, great. If I can't, at least I know in the future.
And you're speaking to the books on that one. So we call that distancing and pursuing in terms of a couple dynamic. And as long as a couple has something figured out, like you do, like you've mentioned, you have a plan, you know how it works. That's great. Mariam, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's actually from the audience. So someone asked me, and I'll add a little twist to it, that certain women feel like they lose their independence when they're in a relationship. And I had a friend who a man came up to the right proper ways. We talked to her and asked her, second day they spoke, and said, if I wanted X and Y, if I wanted X and you wanted Y, but I wanted, basically he told her that if you wanted X and I wanted Y, we're gonna do Y, and that you don't have a say in it. So in that situation, the audience member is asking, is that in all relationships, or how to deal with it?
Okay. So again, golden, because it's one of the questions I have written down. So thanks, Mariam. So I'm going to add a little bit more to that. So one of the things we know is it's not important what type of couple relationship you have. Like there's nothing that says, you know, there's three forms. Having a traditional couple where someone stays at home and then someone works is better than having someone that sometimes works part-time, and it's kind of a blend. We call it a transitional couple, where the chores are for the home and the roles are kind of more shared. And then the third form is in the other extreme, we call it equalitarian. So both people work, both people change the same amount of diapers, they split the DTE bill down the middle. So there's nothing that says that one of these types of relationships is better than the other. But what we know is you have to talk about it and you have to agree on it. So if you have no agreement on the roles in the marriage, you're gonna be in trouble. So I'm hearing a lot of noise, so I'm hoping we can quiet it down and hopefully be able to listen to the inner conversation. So my question, to deepen the question, did you talk about roles before you got married? And were you flexible in allowing those roles to change? Because we have an ideal, you get married, life changes. Can we have a couple comments about that?
My wife told me, you better work, buy me a big house, take me on great vacations. I'm just joking. That's
so
not what
okay.
she said.
My response to that, in the beginning of our relationship, I was still going to college. And I remember my mom said, one of the biggest things is, Shadi, if you're going to get married, you need to finish school, and you need to make sure that Musa is going to allow for that. So again, it's open communication. And I remember asking him that, will you allow me to finish my education? And if I want to pursue a job, will you allow that as well? So he was totally supportive. He thought it was very important because he's seen future. If something happened to me, would you be able to stand on your own 2 feet? So,
So you did discuss it beforehand.
we did. And
On the first night.
Alhamdulillah, I did finish my education, and I finally, after 9 years, have pursued a career now, and it's working, and he's picking up some things at home. And
also willing to be flexible in transitioning from traditional to transitional.
exactly, and it's not what I thought I wanted to do, but again, it's open communication. And when I sat down and said, you know, I think I'm ready to step into the career world, he was supportive, and we work hand in hand, and we work together, and we make sure that, you know, the kids.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You also have to reciprocate it, right? I think for a long time she put me first in my career, and alhamdulillah, I've been able to move along. And then, so she wanted to start her career. So then at some point you've got to reciprocate that back and say, all right, how can I support her? And so I've had to step back some things at work, make sure I'm home on time so she can go to work and kids.
I hear
And
you saying is check-ins are important. You can't just keep going. You need to check in.
yes.
So due to time's sake, I'm going to ask the guy if he has a question, and then after we'll wrap it up.
All right, Assalamu alaikum. My question is a bit similar to the previous one. You know, if you know you want yellow paint and you know your wife wants blue paint,
You give her the blue.
you give her the blue. You know, that's something that can be.
You do green.
You do green.
Get that? Get that?
Happy wife, happy life.
Yellow, blue, green.
So unless it's a big deal, I mean that can be resolved quite easily. But what if, but what if the problem, the conflict is more, you know, dealing with your mission, your outlook on life. It's not, yellow paint, green paint. It's, maybe the husband thinks my child doesn't need to go to college. That's not very important. Or, he doesn't need to learn Quran at a young age. That's not very important to me. It's more of these more important issues that I see, and there's a difference. You don't want to give up because that's something you strongly believe in, and you don't want to argue too much because that will cause too much conflict. So because I'm asking this question because you can't use the same conflict resolution skills as you do with yellow paint, green paint. The tools you have to use are a bit different.
So I would say you can if it's the same emotion you bring to it. But if you are as passionate about a color as you are about something life-altering, you could. But assuming those are on different trajectories, you can't. But what I think is interesting is if you apply that moral lens, and this is a cop-out answer. If you do a lot of the work up front and you integrate your parents, you come to these types of conversations, you really outline what makes an ideal spouse, and you say up front, I want my child to learn Quran. I'm interested in tahara in the home looking like this. I'm not interested in interest. Like those really big things, you have to have a game plan for up front. And before you even get to know someone, you should have your checklist. But when you're in the marriage, you might need a third party. You might need mediation. There's a spectrum of conflict resolution skills. And I think when appropriate, you need to go to the imam as well. You might need reinforcement. Do you have an opinion on how it should be solved?
For maybe the smaller conflicts, you talk it out. And usually if you're, cool-headed, you bring the argument. If you have the superior argument, you win. But when it's more, these things, when your vision is different. I mean, I'm not saying you're two completely incompatible person, just on this specific issue. And, she strongly believes, in this, and you strongly believe something else. It's more difficult to come to a, conclusion through regular, just sitting down on the couch and talking.
People are welcome to come to my office to figure out. So it's a wonderful question, and it's a deep question. And what I would share two things, and then we're kind of have to do a reflection and wrap it up. One reflection is you have to really know yourself before you get married to know what you value, specifically as it relates to Islam. But religion is one of those things that changes. So maybe someone gets married and they're not as embedded in faith as they are 10 years down the line. Or vice versa. You think you're married to someone who honors faith, and then they go on a different path. Like Allahu Alam, you don't know what's going to happen. But what you need to know is what you believe. I think if you apply that moral lens to marriage, feel free to go read that New York Times op-ed. It's really interesting. That's the saving grace, is applying the morality. And then the other thing is, again, it's how you handle arguments. And I think when children are involved and a moral question is involved, stakes are that much higher, right? It's tough. I want to see if there's a couple reflections from the group, and then we'll wrap up with a final go around.
Reflections on that question? It's a great question, Sayyid Ali, and we've actually been struggling with this a little bit recently since the kids are now of close to school age, and in terms of what type of school we want them in, Islamic school or alternative curriculum school or whatever it is. It's been weighing on us because Ali has a certain way that he wants the kids to be raised. For me, I have a little bit more of the social pressure from society that I want my kids to be the best at everything. So it's finding, and I think Hajjah Nadia obviously nailed it. She's a therapist, so she really knew the right answer. But is compromise, number one, I think is so important, and knowing how to handle this conversation, knowing how to handle the discussion, respecting people's, your partner's opinion. And so, I remember one time when we were discussing it, I'm like, Ali, bring me the research. Show me, why are you so passionate about this way? Show me, where did you get this passion from? Show me the research where you got this information from, and maybe then I can try to understand your view. Because usually, most of the time, everybody has their own opinion. Like, I'm set in my opinion about how to raise the kids, and he's set in his way. And so sometimes we have to have that discussion, bring some research to it, bring second opinions, or maybe experiences from other families or parents. I know I've talked to Hajjah Khadija about some of the parenting she's done with her kids. And so it becomes like a very open discussion.
And there's a book, it's called 150 Questions Before the Wedding. And it's 150 premarital education questions about Islamically related items that we don't think to ask. Things about finance and zakat, and are you going to pay khums, and what about interest, and what about budget, are you going to wake up and pray? We get so caught up in the romantic lens that we forget that it's the daily life things that cause conflict. It's not all of the other stuff. And so that's another way to bridge that gap, is to really address it up front.
And your thinking changes too, your thinking morphs. And then so I think we recently, we had some disagreements about a year ago. Our oldest daughter was about to turn 9 and wanted to wear the hijab. And I always said, all right, yeah, when my daughter turns 9, I want her to wear the hijab. And then there was a point I was like, I don't want her to wear the hijab. Does she really understand what it is? Should she wear it? I don't want her to wear it and then take it off. And then we entered into a discussion for I think it probably lasted several months.
I'm very adamant. I wanted her to do it. I'm like, if she wants to, let her.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But I didn't want to force her, right? I don't want it to be forced. And our daughter chose. She's like, Baba, I want to put it on. I'm like, all right. And so my only thing was, can she articulate why?
So what you two are normalizing is that extended conversation over a serious decision is appropriate, and if you can't come to a conclusion in one conversation, it needs to continue to be explored. And that's a great example of realizing some things you can't finish in one night, right? Like a wise couple knows that. You can't figure everything out. So I think for a final go around, why don't you each share a quality that you hope other people in the audience would seek out when they think about their ideal spouse if they're not married, or maybe it is a quality if they are married that would be aspirational. So what's your advice? And if you hear someone say yours, try to come up with a different one.
I would say respect. It's really important, and don't let it go. Don't, whether it's the female to the male or the male to the female, they both need to respect each other and focus on that and not lose that.
I would say when you're looking to find the ideal spouse, ask yourself, will they bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And if you feel like they will help you, and vice versa, can you do the same? Can you both strive in that path to get closer to Allah? And if you feel like you can, then approach it with an open heart.
It's kind of close to Hajjah Khadija's. For me, it's faith. It is, bringing you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm going to explain why. I was 18 when I did Katb Kitab with Ali. I didn't know the things that you're mentioning now, the checklist, asking the right questions. I didn't know that. But I feel like I really got lucky because the faith that he has automatically checked those off for me. And so not everybody might be that lucky. For me, because I knew I picked somebody who has faith, I kind of got lucked out. I got lucky with that, and I didn't have to worry about some of the things you're mentioning because it's a big struggle nowadays. I have a lot of friends who their husbands are not at the faith level that they want them to be, and it's causing marital issues. And so faith should be the number one thing on your priority list for an ideal spouse, in my opinion.
For me, it's patience. I think if you are willing to take the time to understand the perspective of your spouse and understand why her position is as strong or maybe not as strong, then you can set those blocks to start compromising.
Yeah, as Diane Marriage is Happy Family says, when you learn to argue well, you fall in love more because you learn what's bothering your spouse. So Hajj, you keep talking right to the literature.
You read them all.
You read, yeah.
Flexibility. I think it's important that you are flexible and you can compromise. You understand what really means most to you, and at the same time, not everything has to go your way.
What's left to say? Yeah, I guess I'd add commitment to that on that side. You don't want someone who's going to walk away. I think life is hard. Life is not easy. You want someone who's going to stick it out for you. And I just go back and say, I think there's a hadith that says your unborn child, right, has 3 rights over you, right? And one of them is picking a good spouse. And so it's amazing how our kids turn out like us. So I think if you were to come to any of us, you'll probably see that one of our children would maybe be more like one or the other of the spouses. And so I think that's something you really have to be attuned to when you're starting to look for a spouse and you're looking at someone is, do you want your kid to grow up to be like that? I don't think people think a lot about that.
That's great. So I'm going to add 2 things and we're going to wrap up. I would add, if possible, you should have fun in your marriage. You have to keep it lighthearted. There should be humor. There should be laughter. And there should be a shared vision for where you want that couple and family relationship to go. The research shows that couples that bond together over something, whether it's planning the youth group, starting a business, investing in something that they grow together, those are the couples that end up lasting a really long time. They last a lifetime. So in conclusion, if you have questions, if you have feedback, we'll stick around. I would love to also gather thoughts you can provide to the MYC, how you felt about this setup. Is it something that worked? Would you like to see it again? Never again? And just to continue to remind you of resources, we mentioned quite a few today. Please come up to me if you want additional resources. And the final thing I would end with is, if you are single or married, think about your list of ideal qualities and interactions. So the qualities you have are different than the type of relationship dynamics and interactions that you would find to be ideal. Like flexibility is an example of a dynamic. Being generous is a quality, but it could also be a dynamic. Like, am I generous, merciful? You had mentioned it, with the other person. And then examine that list and say, where am I on this? Oftentimes, we are experts in the other person or in this person that doesn't exist yet, in the prototype that we think we want. And so first and foremost, we need to make sure that we have these things. And that is one way to combat the loneliness that we might feel if we're not in a couple relationship or in a healthy relationship. So with that, I want to thank you all for your attention and being a great audience. And Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if there's announcements.
في الختام يعني اريد في الختام لا الاخوان احب ان شويه كلمه بالختام خلي لا عاد خلصت يعني بعد ما السلام عليكم. طبعا انا استمع احد الندوات العلميه اللي تنقل على القنوات العربيه انه يقولون الحب يموت بعد الزواج بعد فتره. هذا الحب الغرائزي. الحب اللي اكبر من هذا ما يموت بعد فتره، ممكن ان يتجدد او يقوى. كيف نقوي هذا الحب او كيف نجدده؟ انه الزوجه تكون كل يوم في شكل لزوجها، اما في عقلها او ثقافتها او في علمها او في اقتصادها قد او في ثروتها قد يكون. فعندما تتجدد كل يوم في شكل ممكن ان يتجدد الحب بعد اي فتره. وشكرا.
The Hajj was saying that he saw on a TV channel that love dies out after marriage. I'm assuming they said it as a joke, but he said, no, that is true. But what type of love? The love that stems from desire and lust. He says, yeah, that's true. Maybe you're so in love, so in lust with another person before the marriage, but then once you get to know them, 1 year, 2 years, that fades away. But he's saying that type of love, the one that stems from lust, fades away. But there's another type of love that can be renewed, can grow stronger, it can grow weaker after marriage. He didn't bring the name, but
Clinically, and I think we alluded to this, that's the love of companionship. That's the love that lasts, that creates sustainable relationships. It's a good reminder to end on. So we can informally converse, but thank you all. And assalamu alaikum.